the thing was that internally, I was not super happy yet. And I ended up going to Nomad Summit in Las Vegas. And I started to meet people that gave me a new mindset, gave me a new way, and actually felt the emotions of what it's like to be in EDM environments. And music that night started to change my life in many positive ways. And as soon as I started to become my own best friend inside of my head, my external life, where we're having this nomad life, and my internal life started to match up, and I started to have a much better experience of life. And the quality of your life is the quality of your emotions. So as I started to change my thoughts and my emotions, everything else got better.
Welcome to a new episode of the Nomad Summit Podcast. Today with Patrick Farrell. We are recording this in Bansko at the site of the Bansko Nomad Fest. But it turns out that Patrick has quite an interesting story to tell that is well connected to the Nomad Summit, but also to a lot of other events in this community. So Patrick,
absolutely.
Introduce yourself.
It's good to be here. Thank you for inviting me on your podcast. And I'm excited. My name is Patrick. I've been traveling the world as a digital nomad for about 9 to 10 years. And it's been quite the journey to go from 9 to 5, actually going on a nomad event that started to change my life, as well as Nomad Summit was a pivotal moment as well. So I'm excited to chat with you about it today.
This episode of the Nomad Summit Podcast is brought to you by GigSky, the eSIM solution for travelers who want reliable mobile data without the hassle of SIM cards. Check them out at gigsky.com.
The Nomad Summit Podcast.
When we prepared this podcast and had a conversation, it turned out it's probably something like two guys talking about emotions.
Yeah.
More about that later. First, I want to learn more about your journey, how you went to your first Nomad Summit and where this brought you where you are today.
Absolutely. So I am an electrical engineer by trade. I went to Virginia Tech, and when I graduated, I ended up going and doing a couple jobs. One landed me in New York City, and I worked underneath a PhD doing software development for about 5 years. I learned way more there than I ever learned in school. I actually love college, but I learned a lot working underneath that. My boss, who was a PhD student, and he ended up building a very large company now. But along that way, he taught me a ton about software development and how to actually build software in a way that I think is very powerful and needed in the world. And eventually, this is kind of where the emotions come in, is I started to feel frustrated and overwhelmed and kind of like I plateaued in New York City. And I was ready to make a change, but I didn't know actually what change I was about to make. And I took about 6 months to figure it out, I would say. And I started to think, should I join the military, which I'm glad I didn't do. I started to think about going to get an MBA. I started to think about getting a job. And I didn't really know what was going to be the next step yet. But I was frustrated. I was wanting to work out more. I was wanting to have a good life where I felt like I was doing a lot of really awesome stuff in the world. And I was just kind of like, it's not that I didn't like my job. I just kind of felt burnt out and like I wanted to do more. And it was actually on a business trip. I was in a hotel room somewhere on a business trip, and I saw an ad for Nomad Cruise. And as soon as I saw Nomad Cruise, it was like I jumped around the room. I was like elated. I was like, this is my ticket out. And I kid you not, I like screamed and jumped on the bed, and I booked the ticket then and there, not even knowing how to tell my girlfriend I was going to go, not knowing how I was going to tell my boss what I was going to do. It was just me getting excited about my next step.
That's an interesting story, and I'm pretty sure Johannes would love that. Have you ever shared that with him?
I think I have, but not probably officially, and probably need to chat with him more about it.
Little side note here for those who want to have a similar experience to Patrick. There will be a Nomad cruise going in February, right after the next Nomad Summit in Chiang Mai. They will start in Singapore and go over to Hong Kong. So if you're considering, you can put these two things very well together and come to Chiang Mai and then join a Nomad cruise. But Patrick, what happened then? So you booked that ticket?
So I booked that ticket, and it's an interesting journey because I started to notice, actually not quite notice yet, but I started to notice along this journey that I was very much in the employee mindset when I left. And going on that cruise was the first time I had been around people that were building Airbnb businesses and that were using their software development skills to travel the world. And I was pretty excited, to be honest with you. I was just really excited about what was possible. And I ended up on that cruise going from Cartagena, Colombia to Portugal. And it was the first time I really saw community and people just lifting each other up and saying like how they wanted to support each other. They wanted to help each other grow and make a podcast and do all things that allowed them to travel, have more freedom, and make a bigger impact in the world. And it was actually after the cruise, which was interesting too. That's kind of a part of a story where I had such an awesome experience on the cruise, and then I landed in Europe and I kind of like went into depression for a little bit, actually, which we can talk about in the emotional part, because it was like this community thing was being ripped away from me because I had it for 2 weeks. We were in Lisbon and I ended up going on a hike in Sintra. And I started to ask one of the girls that was on the cruise with me, like, how did you build your business? How did you start to build your personal brand and actually start to put yourself out there? And she told me how she went from 1,000 followers to 18,000 followers in 12 months. And that started a series of events as well, where I started to make videos. I posted every day on Instagram for 3 times a day. And that was really cool because there was a guy on that cruise also, his name was Miles Beckler. He has a really great YouTube channel on online businesses. And he invited me, because he saw me doing all these things, to be his videographer in Thailand. And it was an event called the Abundance Circle, where we would really just, in a much smaller environment, we would go to a villa in Thailand, and then we did it in Bali later, and teach each other how to build online businesses, YouTube, Instagram, sales funnels. And that was a bigger start of the transformation to actually build technology and start to use what I already knew. And that's a big part of what I want to teach in my programs too. Is I mentioned earlier, I thought about going to get an MBA, joining the military. What I really needed to do was take a look inside of who I already was and leverage what I already knew, which at the time was software development. And I used software development to build a $100,000 or $150,000 a year business over the next 9 years with what I already knew.
You mentioned that attending the Nomad Summit changed your life. That's how our conversation at the beginning of this week started. So what was this chain of events that you mentioned here?
Yeah, so I was living a really cool nomad life. I was starting to make changes in my life. I was starting to build a business, doing software development for different companies. And the thing was that internally, I was not quite happy yet. Like I had this external life that we were living and traveling the world and doing the fun things that you and I are both doing right this minute. But internally, I was not super, super happy yet. And I ended up going to Nomad Summit in Las Vegas. And that event and those people that I met there, we started to go to parties that evening. We went to Encore Beach Club and saw Galantis. And then the next night we went to Access Las Vegas. And I started to meet people that gave me a new mindset, gave me a new way, and actually felt the emotions of what it's like to be in EDM environments. And music that night started to change my life in many positive ways. And that really gave me the tool to start to change my emotions through music. And then for the next year, I would go to raves and festivals and stuff like that. So it was about the environment that we were in. I think that's really important. We were in a fun environment for Nomad Summit. The people I was with people that were expanding me, that were like giving me new ideas. And then the music gave me a tool to start to reprogram my mind. And with that tool, I started to reprogram these thoughts of like, you're stupid for breaking up with your ex-girlfriend and all these things that were going through my mind. And I started to reprogram and become my own best friend inside of my head. And as soon as I started to become my own best friend inside of my head, my external life, where we're having this nomad life, and my internal life started to match up, and I started to have a much better experience of life. And the quality of your life is the quality of your emotions. So as I started to change my thoughts and my emotions, everything else got better.
That sounds like a full concept. It doesn't sound like you just had this realization and then all of a sudden everything was different. There was like a starting point to this, like this kickoff around the Las Vegas Nomad Summit. But also from the words you use, I get the impression that there is some kind of science or research behind that. So you dug into the matter of emotions.
Yes.
We talked about like your emotional home in a range and these kind of things. It's not just like all the result of your very own internal process.
No, it started to open a doorway. So I didn't know that that level of emotional happiness was available to me until that night just really brought out this like new level of happiness in my life that showed a door. And from that doorway, I started to connect with people and a series of synchronicities, actually, where I ended up living with the girl. Her name was Christine. I met her at Nomad Summit, and she had a co-living house in LA. And I ended up living at her co-living house in LA. And then because it was a bunch of entrepreneurs living together, because it was an entrepreneur co-living house, they were all very excited, and they all invited me to go to Tony Robbins' Unleash the Power Within. And you mentioned the science. Yes, that's where I started to really learn more about the science, the internal beliefs, the subconscious mind, the reprogramming of everything that's going on in your mind. Because if you're constantly thinking in the past, which I was doing, I was beating myself up about my ex-girlfriend, and I couldn't live in the present, and I couldn't create from the present moment. So that started a series of events where I went to Tony Robbins, I went to Mind Valley, and also Dr. Joe Dispenza a few years later, which he's really a really good resource for anyone that wants to understand more about the science, because he teaches you about the science of it.
Sounds like we have a lot of links for further research to put into the show notes.
For sure.
So yeah, find them in the show notes and in the blog post on nomadsummit.com. We will add all that you as a listener can also put yourself into a new state of happiness after studying a little bit of psychology through all this material. So how long did this process take?
It's still ongoing. I think it's a lifelong process, to be honest with you. But once you realize you're on that process and you're on that journey, it starts to become more of your daily life, and you start to recognize your own thoughts, your own emotions. And like I said earlier, the quality of your life is the quality of your emotions. So if you're frustrated every day, if you're not feeling in alignment, if the thoughts that are going through your brain are not aligned with how you're feeling, there's something that might be off. And that was what was off for me at the time, was my ex-girlfriend meets the life that I wanted. So there's something called the scale of consciousness. And I started to learn about this. I started to learn about shame and guilt, frequency emotions, the frustration or neutrality or joy. These are all different states of being that we don't often take time to consciously become aware of how we're feeling in the moment. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense, and especially with in connection with the conversation we had prior to this recording, when you talked about the emotional home, like the place where a person usually is on that scale.
Yep.
So do you want to elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, so your emotional home is kind of like your average throughout the day, I would say. And it's kind of like a default set point for where you live on a daily basis. So if your default emotional home is, let's say, anger, your quality of life might not be the best. I'm not going to judge you and say that that's right or wrong, but usually people don't like to feel anger on a daily basis, right? Now, if you could change that and feel neutrality or joy, or even boredom would be higher than anger, right? Like, it's better to feel bored than it is to feel angry. So as you start to rise up, you can have a better quality of life. And I now get joy out of doing this podcast. It feels good to sit here and do this podcast, right? Like, we are literally looking out at a beautiful mountain in Banksco right now as we record this. And I feel like this is like a dream come true. And
yeah, unfortunately, this is an audio podcast, but we'll put some pictures around the blog post at nomadsummit.com.
And this would have been a dream come true a while ago. So remember back to when I previously had quit my 9-to-5, I was feeling frustrated, angry every day. I rarely feel that today, right? Like, that was my default state. And today it's joy, love. It's not to say you'll never go down there. Like, that's not what anybody should be taking away with this. It's a roller coaster, but it's where is the average set point, and how can you continue to rise that average set point? Because as you rise that, you get to show up in your life in a different state of being that allows you to do more stuff, that allows you to have more fun experiences, that it allows you to serve more people and run a business that gives you more freedom.
Before we continue this episode, let me take a moment to thank our sponsor, GigsGuy, the eSIM that I've trusted for years while traveling the world. What I love is how easy it is. Once you install the GigSky eSIM, you don't need to mess with reinstalling a new eSIM as you move between countries. Just open the app, pick a plan for your next destination, and you're connected. I've even used it on a cruise. No issues, no stress. Whether you're heading to Bali, Berlin, or Bansko, GigSky makes staying online seamless and affordable. Stay connected wherever your journey takes you. Download the GigSky app or learn more at gigsky.com.
If you imagine now a listener of this podcast who is currently in a 9-to-5 rat race and has realized that he or she wants to make a step out of this, what would your suggestion be for a starting point to look and learn and maybe take the first step of action?
Yeah, so if they were going to take the first step of action, I would start to become aware of how they're feeling every day and notice if they are frustrated. It's part of your intuition. If you are feeling frustrated every day, there's something off that the universe, a higher power, or your own emotions are just guiding you to make a change, whatever you believe in. And that was me listening to that. You'd have to take a moment and pause and notice, am I feeling frustrated more often than I would like to? Am I feeling joy? Or am I loving my life? Or am I complaining? That was one thing that I started to notice, was I would complain about my work, even though I didn't mind my job. It was just more the experience of being there and being tied to a 9-to-5 and not doing what I really wanted to be doing. That would make me complain about everything. And then that complaining energy would actually radiate into my coworkers and stuff like that. And that really wasn't helpful for the business either. So I would say first is become aware of how you're feeling on a daily basis.
And I guess when you talk about like the complaints towards your coworkers, it's also a lot about the environment. And if the people around you are in a similar or even worse state of mind, that's like a downward spiral.
Yes.
So the people that you surround yourself with have a huge influence on that as well. So if you surround yourself with people that are on a similar or higher level of emotions, that will rather lift you up.
Absolutely. And like people can inspire you to go out and travel the world and be that amazing entrepreneur, or even just give yourself a little more freedom. That little inspiration saying you can do it versus maybe someone else in your life saying, I don't believe that that's possible, right? It doesn't feel as good to tell someone, hey, I want to go build my own business and travel the world. And then your best friend of 20 years is telling you, are you really sure you can do that? I don't think that's possible, right? It doesn't feel as good as someone else that's in our community saying, of course you can do that. Here's like some tools and resources and stuff you can learn and how to take your ideas to life. It feels expansive when we do that.
And that's also the beauty of this community and this lifestyle. And I've been fully location independent and a perpetual traveler for now more than 8 years. And people often ask me like, aren't you getting tired of this? Do you want to settle down one day? And I'm like, hell no. I'm celebrating this lifestyle every single day. And in the end, it comes down to having a right balance of places that I want to return to that feel home. For me, that's Estonia, for example. For the last 8 years, I've spent every single summer 2 or 3 months in Estonia. Returning to Chiang Mai, to Thailand is such a thing. But balancing this with exploring new places. So like the joy of meeting old friends. And you talked about this joyful moment of sitting here on this balcony with this beautiful mountain view. And I totally resonate with that, as well as with, for example, coming back to Chiang Mai this season for the first time since COVID and going back to a cafe where I, in the last seasons before COVID, when I went to Chiang Mai, went like twice a week for breakfast. And I haven't seen these people in 5 years. And I walked in, the owner of the cafe smiled at me, asked me, same like every time. And I was like, how can you remember? What did I have every time? He's like, yeah, the French toast, the flat white, and this mix of juice of lime, passion fruit, and watermelon. I was like, wow.
Yeah.
And then he greeted me with a hug, and I sat down, and I had this smile in my face for the rest of the day or the rest of the week. So these joyful moments that also come with this lifestyle of changing your environment, meeting new people, coming back to old places, catching up with friends, and then having this big community that we now here have at the Bansko Nomad Fest, that we mentioned, the Nomad Cruise, the Nomad Summit community, people that meet for the first time and then meet again the next year and catch up and exchange and share all their tips and travel tips and experiences and inspire each other. Like, I've been to this place, and the other one's like, oh wow, I want to see that as well. What's your best tip for accommodation, food, hiking, whatever? So this abundance of ideas, mutual inspiration, mutual empowerment, and in addition, of course, like supporting each other with business inspirations and best practice tips and insights.
And I want to give you, the audience, one more tip and tool is, as you travel and do these things, what he just mentioned is it's creating what's called an emotional anchor. And that emotional anchor, when I was at Nomad Summit in Las Vegas, where I was like joyful and expansive at that party, I can take a moment and close my eyes and go back to that moment right now. I can pull myself back into those emotions.
That's beautiful.
You can create an emotional anchor where you were in that cafe in Chiang Mai, and you can visualize yourself and you walking in there, and you are like having that person remember your order and stuff like that. It feels good. And I've been in states, like the entrepreneur journey is the biggest personal development journey that you can go on, and it can feel really low at times, and you feel frustrated and overwhelmed. And one thing I do sometimes is I'm on an airplane going to another place. I'll literally go through my phone and just scroll through the history of my life with all these pictures and videos and just feel back into all these previous experiences. That raises my emotional state and makes me grateful for this life. And then I can feel better right now.
That's very smart. And a little daily practice, hands-on tip. Do you have more of those?
Sure. I mean, like, it would probably be longer than you want to talk about fully on this podcast, but we can do another one for sure. But mindfulness, meditation's huge. I listen to a lot of meditation each morning, or even going to sleep at night. If you can start your day with the right energy.
What do you mean with listen to meditation?
Okay, so a lot of people, that's a good point, is a lot of people think meditation is just calm your mind and focus on your breath. And there is what's called guided meditation. I find guided meditation a lot easier. You can go on YouTube and find meditations that will basically guide your mind towards gratitude or towards different experiences. Mind Valley has some. I'm a certified Mind Valley coach. Tony Robbins, myself. There are different meditations on YouTube, or as well as different apps that you can download, and it'll guide your mind. And just like I was saying, those thoughts create the feelings in your body. Well, if you take yourself out of the thoughts, let's say for a minute, it's actually interesting. This particular thing is what started to get me really out too of these negative thoughts around my ex and that stuff. After Nomad Summit, I also had this experience where I was like by myself in an Airbnb, and I was a bit overwhelmed, and my mom said, go meditate. And that actually really helped me. Like, meditation started to help me every day, and that was a big tool.
And also the advice of mom is usually a good one that you should listen to.
Yeah. And breath work, meditation, yoga. Yoga's huge. And just being around people that want to do stuff. I also think taking time for yourself. In the Nomad community, everybody's like, we always must go out and party and meet everyone. And I have done very little of that this week, actually. I've gone and done the talks and things like that. And I took time for myself to meditate and make sure I was feeling good.
Yeah, I totally resonate with that. I guess the organizers wouldn't like that too much, but I have this week just attended one single talk and 0 of the unconferences, which I feel a little bit guilty because that's a huge value here at the Bansko Nomad Fest, like the unconferences.
It's just taking care of yourself. Like, if you're essentially a battery, right? And some days that battery feels expansive and you can go out and talk to everyone and things like that. And some days you're feeling like you want to go back and reset your battery and recharge it, just like you plug in your laptop. So I think that's important to also take time for yourself to make sure your batteries are high so that you can best take advantage of those parties and those talks and those meetings when you are in person.
If you're enjoying the Nomad Summit podcast, share it with your community. Every share helps more people discover the tips, stories, and inspiration we bring you each week. So, hit that share button and help us spread the Nomad Summit spirit around the world.
Where are you traveling next from here?
I'm actually running a retreat in Croatia, so we're going to take a few days to get to by land. I was like, I don't really want to get on an airplane right now, so I'm going to travel by bus to Zagreb, and then we're taking a train to Split, and we go around the islands. And just like actually Nomad Cruise was kind of this inspiration, I love taking people on boats and talking about these type of conversations that we're having right now on the water. So we're doing a very mini version there. And then, I don't know.
So you go on a sailboat?
We go on a sailboat, yeah.
Funny thing. Yeah. We have just recorded an episode with Orest Zup of Nomad Mania, actually on a sailboat in Croatia last week.
Here we go. Well, there's a good synchronicity or coincidence, right?
Yeah, I'm a sailor myself. I'm a skipper. So I took some friends on a sailboat. And for those who have not listened to that episode, highly recommend. Orest is one of those extreme travelers who like to explore places where not many people go or visit all countries in the world. And we went to the most remote of the Croatian islands that is closer to Italy than to Croatia. It's called Palagruza. And if you want to hear more about that, tune into the episode with Orest.
And I think we talked about that a little yesterday too, is like, I didn't know you were a skipper, so maybe we can do a little Nomad Summit trip with a bunch of people. That would be cool.
Actually, we're considering this right now, so it's not a promo or a launch, but maybe a little test of the audience. We were thinking, as we're partnering with Dimitris and Marcos and Massa and Lotus of the Athens Nomad Fest, that we would, under the Nomad Summit brand, maybe charter a boat for a week after that, last week of September, just a small sailboat, 4 cabins, and bring people who are interested in that, just share the cost. So if you're interested in, as a listener here, and joining us sailing a week Greek islands, drop us a note, because we will probably not put that out on the website publicly, but just see who comes and joins, and then we can sail together.
It's a very powerful experience, and that's what we're doing in Croatia. Is we do yoga, meditation. We'll have a lot of fun, but we also take care of ourselves and work on our health and wellness.
In the end, I love sailing so much because it's quality time with people.
Yep.
If you sit down with a crew, last 2 weeks we were 8 people on the boat. That's already like on the upper end of the scale. But if you have time sailing, that's where you have a lot of time to have deep and meaningful conversations, where you make food together, where you explore. So that's where you really get to know people and where you can get down to the bottom.
I love it.
I mean, not with a boat. Get down to the bottom of topics.
Absolutely. It's a meaningful experience to be on water and taking time with people. I think that's something that's actually missing in the world. I think that's why people feel disconnected right now, is they don't have as much meaningful time. And as the world goes in this AI age and everything like that, it's even more important to do stuff like we go on a boat together and connect.
Funny enough, for me, it's one of the main motivations behind bringing back the Nomad Summit, behind running all this and expanding the brand and connecting with people, is to kind of counter AI. The belief that people that are surrounded by AI agents more and more will have also, to counter this more and more, the urge for real connections, for in-person events. That's also one of the reasons why we, for example, don't live stream Nomad Summit. This is an in-person event. You come there not only to listen to the talks, but to build these meaningful connections with the other people there.
Absolutely. And I think that there's going to be an interesting time where we can leverage tech to make more money, so we can grab more freedom, so we can actually be in person more. And that's what I'm all about.
Perfect. Patrick, if people want to catch up with you, what's the best way?
So I have a website and an Instagram that are the same, patrickfarrell.life, FARRELL.LIFE. That's both my Instagram and my website.
We put the links in the show notes. You can just click.
And that's probably the best way. You can connect with me on LinkedIn as well.
Thank you so much for sharing all these thoughts and stories.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me, and thank you for creating and expanding this community and this platform that has actually made a big impact on my life.
With great pleasure. Thank you so much, and see you next week.
Produced by radioguru.co.uk.